Welcome to the Boston Art Podcast,
Boston's premier art podcast,
where we talk art, culture, and philosophy.
My name is Theodore Earthworms.
And I am Brian Huntress.
Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Going?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. It's the first actual nice day out in so long.
I know.
Yeah, it's truly beautiful out. Went to a little park in Malden, which was lovely. I don't know if you guys have been there. It's called Waits Mount, and there's a beautiful view of the city there.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, it was a good time.
That's so funny. We actually spent, I think part of it's in Malden. We went to the Fells today, so we were kind of nearby doing a similar thing.
I love the Fells.
A beautiful park.
Beautiful up there. Just love walking through the woods.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun. It's funny that you're not allowed to go near the water because it's like drinking water, but everybody does, and it's so beautiful because it's like it's beautiful, clean, fresh water, but it's like they don't want us to look at it. We just want to sit on rocks and look at the beautiful water. We don't.
I think that's allowed.
We're not gonna drink it or anything.
I know. They should just trust us. Trust us with the water.
Right.
I know. Oh man. So how have you been? Did you do anything fun today art-wise?
You know what? Let's think. Did I do anything fun today art-wise? I didn't. I have to be totally honest. I have not been great about sitting down and doing art, although I'm really excited about a drawing that I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to work on it more this week. It's so funny because I had like a deadline to submit something. I was like, I'm into this new one. It's going to be great. It'll like be a kick in my butt to finish it. And then I was like, actually, I don't really want to rush it.
Yeah.
So I just submitted some older ones. I mean, they're still relatively recent. One was inspired by my cat, and I've only had her a little over a year, so that definitely counts as recent in my book.
Oh, that's definitely recent. I've submitted things to shows that were from like 5 years ago. Sometimes it just is what it is.
Right.
I know, it is what it is. I have one that I started when I was in grad school, and which was, I think I did it like summer 2019, and then finished it in 2023.
Yeah.
So it's all relative.
And the work that you do, I think we talked about this recently in person, but it must take a really long time to do because it's so, like, you make, for the listener, like, pen and ink drawings that are so detailed and patterned that it probably takes a long time with the mark making.
Yes, Theo, it really does. I think that's kind of the thing, is it takes a long time, and it's funny because I love, like, doing the little things and, like, really just, like, sitting with something and, like, going super in-depth, but then I think sometimes my, like, energy runs out, like, kind of quickly, and I kind of look like I haven't done a lot by the end. But
Yeah.
actually, I've, like, been working, like, for a pretty long time, like, on, like, a little section or something like that. But, yeah, pen and ink drawings, and I usually, like, start off with pencil, and then go in with ink and sort of, like, alternate between pencil and ink.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a little time consuming, especially if there's like a certain area where I'm like indecisive about like what I want to put there or something like that.
Yeah,
but,
totally.
yeah.
That's fun. That's super cool. I know that we have talked about art before, but I want to just kind of do a whole background. So I'm going to dial back a little bit. Could you tell me a little bit about how you first, like, got into making art? Like, were you really young, or was it later on in school?
Oh, yes. You know what? I was really, really young. I think, the first memory I kind of have where I think it was, like, really sort of something clicked in me was, I was a kid. I drew a lot, just, like, regular, like, little smiley faces, stuff like that, little people and everything. But I remember once I would ask my mom to draw a lot of things, and so she drew this figure, this woman, I guess, and I sort of copied it. And I remember, I don't know, I guess my mom was like, oh, that actually looks, it's really good. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of, like, positive validation, I guess. And obviously I'm like a little kid that like feels awesome. But I drew a ton as a kid. I would get like stacks of computer paper and like literally like make drawing after drawing after drawing until I like went through the stack.
Yeah.
Basically, which I don't know, maybe it was a little wasteful, but it was really fun. I would spend so long on it. And that just sort of continued, like, even through high school. And I think that's something that was really good for me, too, is that my mom wasn't really an artist. Her mom had been an artist.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
I know. Her mom was a visual artist, but also, like, into other things. She was also an actress and everything, but
wow.
My mom was an art appreciator for sure, and there were always a lot of art prints around, so I think that was really inspiring to me. And I did a lot in high school. I was really fortunate. I'm from Central Mass, and the art program at my school was great. I had amazing teachers. I took AP art in high school. You have to choose a concentration. I remember I chose Beatles songs.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I was pretty proud of that one because, I don't know, it was like I was making artwork in a more imaginative way than I'd been accustomed to, I guess. You know, when you do, like, artwork in school and stuff, like, you definitely have, like, some opportunities to be really creative with it, but a lot of times it tends to be a little bit more technical.
Yeah.
But I remember that was incredibly fun for me, and I majored in painting in college. I had initially wanted to go into art therapy, so I was like, I'll major in art and then do a bunch of psychology courses and then go to art therapy grad school. But my program, I got my bachelor's of fine art at BU, which their College of Fine Arts School of Visual Arts program is actually really, it's interesting. There are like 2 majors. At the time, there were 2 majors.
Oh, wow.
That you could do besides graphic design. It was painting and sculpture.
Oh, that's crazy. That's so narrow.
I know, and they've since added printmaking, but it was like ultra traditional, really. And I went to Mass Art for grad school, and I had friends who went to Mass Art for undergrad, and it was like, oh, wow, there are like 1,000 things you could choose from. But at BU, it was 2. And I did painting, even though I do drawings now.
Yeah, right.
Drawing courses were more foundational in undergrad, but I loved it, and I had a really amazing professors. I ended up obviously not going into art therapy, although it's something that I still really love. But after undergrad, I really transitioned to pen and ink more, and it's something that I find really satisfying. I also find it really good process-wise because it feels really accessible to me.
Yeah.
I think that even though I loved painting, and I do want to paint as well, sort of for fun, I suppose.
Yeah.
In terms of what really works for me now, I just really love drawing.
I really admire too. Oh, sorry. What was it? What did you say?
Oh no, just saying I find it pretty meditative.
Right. One thing I admire too is that it seems very unique to have a almost fully monochromatic portfolio. Mm-hmm. And I found it interesting studying painting. Did you make mostly did you do a lot of black and white paintings and monochromatic paintings when you were studying?
That is such a fantastic question. So the first couple of years, it was basically you use oils, you do a lot of color theory and all this stuff. And then I think I was always very drawn to monochromatic, and I kind of always had to be pushed to maybe you could add colors, Junior and senior year were more of our own personal studios, and we could sort of decide what we did. And so I started off junior year doing black and white things, and I really loved it. Then people were like, oh, what about color? And so I started incorporating color, and I think I enjoy it. A lot of the artwork that I love is I love the color palettes of them. I'm an appreciator of color, but for some reason I am just really, really attracted to black and white palette. And senior year of undergrad was even more black and white. I almost exclusively did that. And I remember one of my painting teachers, not in a bad way because they definitely let us experiment, but one of them sort of made a comment that one of my paintings was more like a drawing. Really what I had done was watered down black acrylic paint and used it as essentially ink wash, I suppose. And I got called out for it.
That's so interesting. I actually had the same feedback when I was in a painting class in undergrad, that they told me that I paint like I'm drawing. And I remember looking at my professor and having no idea what that meant. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? But it was such a profound bit of feedback, because most of what I had done before art school was, like, that's where I started. I've always painted a little bit, but I guess I was painting in a really linear way and, like, blocking color in, but mostly focusing on line. And it's just so funny, like, how I didn't even know that those were different perspectives of, like, different fields of thought until that criticism.
Oh my, that is so interesting that we had similar feedback on that.
Oh, man.
Yeah, because Theo, you, oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, all you.
Oh, I was going to say, like, Theo, you almost always make graphite and ink work just the same.
I did before. I haven't been as much recently, just because I'm also kind of in a little bit of a lull where I've been doing school again, so I haven't been making anything. It's kind of bothering me. But I also found it to be really accessible in, like, high school and college, that it's really easy to carry a pen around, and it's not very easy to carry paints around.
Right,
Yes,
that's true.
for sure.
But do you find that, like, is that something that you're, like, cognizant of when you're working now? Like, do you have to turn off, like, your painterly brain to do the drawing, or to turn off the drawing brain to do the painting? Or does it feel the same?
I think that's what's actually kind of funny is when I did my studio class, and I feel like I kind of moved past the painting thing, and then if I go back to it, I will have to turn off the drawing brain.
Yeah.
I remember when I did my studio class in grad school, because I went to grad school for art education, but we had that studio class.
Cool.
And the professor was like, your drawings look like collages, but you're not collaging? Like, what if you tried collaging?
Ooh.
And it's so funny, because I feel like I do like thinking about layers and stuff in my drawing, but to actually, like, make physical layers, I found that I was like, okay, I have to, like, step out of my drawing brain and, like, think about, like, cutting and layering physically and stuff like that. And it was just, like, so different for me. So I suspect it would be the same thing with painting. What about you? Do you find yourself sort of, like,
yeah,
I definitely do.
continually adjusting?
I think I do, because something that even when I use color, a lot of the time what I'll do is when I do graphite, it's not, like, color theory or anything, right? Like, it's mostly shading, and it's kind of this sort of, like, there's still a gradient, but it's gray to, like, lights to darks. There's no, like, fourth dimension of, like, color and light and warmth and cold and whatever. So I think I do struggle with that sometimes. Like, if I think about it too much, I feel like I struggle with it. But Brian was making fun of me the other day for saying that I'm not good with color theory. Because if I'm painting and I'm just painting, like, not thinking about it, it's completely fine. Like, I've been painting my whole life. But if I get too in my head about it, I suddenly start only painting outlines and, like, making, like, a comic style kind of thing and filling the color in. So it can be really hard, especially if I'm painting in different sessions and half the painting is in one approach, and then I suddenly start going heavy with the lines.
Right.
That can be difficult.
I mean, I think it's too, like, one thing that's, like, that's awesome news about all this too is that, I mean, I feel like when those professors are saying, like, oh, you're drawing, because they told me the same thing, like, oh, you're drawing, you're not painting.
Interesting.
And I think it's because they're trying to force you to learn how to paint three-dimensional things with no lines, with only light and shape.
Yeah.
And it's like, the great part about that is that you have to learn that kind of to pass the class, but you don't ever have to do it again. You could just continue making cool art. Like, there's Da Vinci drawings that are just line.
Yeah.
That are not, you know what I mean? Like, it's just arbitrary.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That is really, really true. And that's something that that makes a lot of sense, because I loved, like, my art professors. I feel like the sort of super traditional especially the drawing classes, like the super technical drawing classes, like, I think those were, like, super, super helpful for me.
Yeah.
But then I also took this very, very experimental class that was really all about sort of, like, letting go a little bit of the process, like letting go of control and sort of seeing where it goes and not putting too much pressure on yourself to create a certain product. And that was definitely, like, the anomaly in my undergraduate classes. but having to sort of, on the other hand, like really concentrate to receive, to create like a technical product. It's just a lot of pressure. And I think that while I really, really benefited from all the stuff that came with that, it does feel pretty liberating to be able to be in charge of my own artistic process at this point. Although I have thought about, going back and maybe doing something technical, like figure drawing, like that, something like that, like I do kind of miss.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when I went back to school and I did that class again, I was like, wow, I kind of forgot what this was like. to like have artwork and then have people sort of like suggesting doing things a different way that like didn't occur to me.
Yeah.
It was an adjustment for sure.
It's so crazy because I feel like so much of art school is sort of a philosophical thing, where even if the work coming out of it has like nothing to do with like what your end goal is, it's these concepts of like realizing that painting and drawing are different schools of thought, or realizing that maybe you want to experiment with a medium you haven't tried before, or somebody giving you feedback that you never would have thought of. It's a lot of it, I feel like, is about expanding your perspective so you can use that thinking later versus even just the technical tool set. It's like the psychological tool set.
Absolutely. That, no, I totally agree. There was actually I had a painting professor, Richard Raceless, who is amazing. He is like painter extraordinaire, color guru, like he knows all this stuff. And I remember him telling us, I think we were freshmen maybe, he was like, you are going to start seeing the world differently. Like you're going to start seeing it in compositions. And which I thought was such a beautiful thing to say. I found it very fascinating at the time, but now it completely resonates with me. And what was funny was I was a guest artist at Alston Open Studios a couple of years ago, and he was there, and he was like, oh, Gabby, let me see like where your art is. And so I showed him, and I felt kind of bad because one, not a painting, two, no color. But I told him, I was like, by the way, like something that like you told me really stuck with me, about seeing the world in compositions. And obviously like my artwork, it's not photorealistic. It doesn't, like, there are definitely like, it gets kind of wacky. It doesn't resemble like things. I really like integrating sort of like imagination with sort of, landscapes we might see in our everyday life.
Yeah.
But I told him, I was like, this drawing in particular was based off of like this little area in this parking garage in Back Bay, and I really loved the dynamism of the lines there. And that's kind of like what you said, like, it's just sort of like an everyday thing you might like pass by without thinking about this structure of this particular part of this parking lot. But yeah, I saw it as a composition. That's like largely thanks to the way he taught us. So that was a cool moment.
That is really cool.
Where I got to talk about that. Yeah, so I think that, like what you said about it sort of altering the way you think or giving you a different perspective on things, that definitely rings true for me.
Yeah.
And something so funny too is that it's very generational too, because the way that we've been taught in art school is definitely not going to be the way that kids born right now will be taught in art school. Like, I've met older artists that graduated college in the 50s and 60s that they were taught that like, oh, like you're only going to see abstract expressionism for the rest of your life. There's not going to be any other art movements. It's all splatter painting and shapes. That's it. And it's like, so that's what they taught them and encouraged them to do. And it's like, I don't know. Like, it's just like, I think it's so, and like, if we had to like give advice to like art students right now or people struggling through school or something, like, I would say too, that it's like, it's just so arbitrary, and just like any other class, the most important thing is learning and passing. And it's like, it's not like, a lot of people have this crisis because they think that if they submit to this syllabus and this style that they're being taught, then it'll ruin their art or ruin their artistic spirit or their vision. But it's really just not like that. I mean, you can, like, it's like an English class. Your teacher wants you to write a certain way, but that doesn't mean you have to write in your journal like that or text like that. You get to just keep going however you want to go. You just follow the rules and pass the class and keep it moving. I don't know.
That is totally true. And I find that so interesting. Like the idea, I had one professor who basically taught like that, you know, like she did her art a certain way and she had her own color palette that she really enjoyed. And I just noticed like throughout the semester, everyone's art started looking the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was like, wait, but this person's art is completely different than this person's art. And her idea of like a good critique was, I would put that in my house. It's like, oh,
yeah,
you're teaching us to make art that you like.
Like,
Right,
no,
yeah.
don't do that.
so yeah, and I honestly, I do wonder like what it's going to be like for kids nowadays, because also like I work with the like teens now, and so many of them are interested in pursuing art and doing things. I feel like the stuff that teens that they're in now, first of all, some of them love digital artwork.
Yeah.
Part of me wonders, like, I wonder how, like, my school's alma mater, like, if it will change all. Like, I have a feeling it's never gonna be like right where like mass art or like other like sort of contemporary focused art programs are, in terms of offering like digital art or animation or illustration and stuff like that. But I feel like that's something that so many young people are interested in. Yeah, I am curious to see like how it changes like as the generations go on.
Yeah, that's so true. I remember when I was like 14 or 15, I had an art teacher at my local art center whose son was an illustrator, and he did digital art illustrations on, I think, like an iPad or something for like video game developers. And I remember her telling us this and showing us prints of his work and having the conversation like, there isn't an original that this is a print of. Like, it's digital art. It was always digital art. This is a Gicley print of the digital art, and he made it with a tablet. And all of us being like, what? Like, what is that? It feels like I came from like eons ago. That's a memory that I have.
Right.
But I don't know, it's crazy.
And it's go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's so much room for expansion within that field, and it's changed so much since that memory, and I'm sure it'll change so much more in the future.
Right, and the technical stuff, and even with like VR and stuff, that's getting so much more advanced that there could be a future where there are art students learning to make murals, and they're doing it in like VR.
Yeah.
And if they don't like how it comes out, it's like there's no consequences. Because I've always found being a muralist one of the most difficult things you could possibly get into, because you don't get to mess up and do a crappy mural on a 50 by 50 foot building. Like it has to be right every time. So it's like, and no one's gonna like just give you, like, it's really hard to get the chance to just mess that up. So imagine if kids could do that like in a computer, almost like where it's just not even real, and it's immersive, so it feels like they're really doing. I don't know. It would be it'd be pretty cool. Who knows?
In a computer.
Yeah, like
That
literally.
is so interesting.
Who could say?
I know, or even just like, wow, that is super, super fascinating. It'll definitely change so much. I'm very curious to see how it goes. I am so bad at digital illustration. I don't know. Like, when it comes to like software, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not like the most well versed in it. And I am so impressed by what people can create. But that mural, that is so true. You know, it'll simplify a lot of things.
Yeah, who could say? You know, like.
Yeah.
The sky, or the internet is the limit. I don't know. Right.
I know, and I think about that even with like AI art too. I know the way technology is sort of impacting art or even artistic processes.
Right.
I honestly can't say I know enough about AI to really say like how it could change things or how people might use it. 'Cause I know there are a lot of different ways people use it. I've never even tried it, but it's I think things will change a lot, and I'm curious about like what galleries will start showing and
Right,
you know, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
But
as far as the AI art goes, I think there's probably countless artists already using it that just aren't saying they're using it. Because like, for example, like imagine imagine if you're, you know, we don't have access to, like, if you wanted to include a lion in a piece of art you were making, like, oh, how am I going to include a lion? It's like, no matter how many times you've seen a picture of a lion, it's going to be insanely difficult to just conjure one into a drawing with zero reference.
Yes.
But as professional artists, it's kind of, it's a bit of a conundrum to find a royalty for, like, an image of a lion to use as a reference that you can legally use. And you probably aren't going to pay for the licensing to use a random picture of a lion. So where are you going to get it? You could get it through AI, through completely synthesized, non-existent lion image. Like, who knows, you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm of the belief that it's a terrible idea to generate AI imagery and then just use it flat out. Yeah, just like use it straight out of the computer, because it's whatever. But I really love the idea of people using it to generate source material to make their art with. Because copyright's a big issue, especially a lot of young artists don't know anything about or don't think about copyright at all. And they're just drawing stuff that they see on Instagram, Google, Pinterest, and it's fine. And that's okay. I hope people keep doing that. But unfortunately, if they were to become a commercial artist, graphic artist, like, you know, they could literally, you know, compromise their portfolio because of using unlicensed imagery.
Oh, yeah, that is so true. I know. I wish that I knew more about, you know, the logistics side of being an artist in it.
Sure, yeah. Me too, really.
Sort of the legal stuff, the business stuff, you know, because, like, I love the creative stuff. But then when it comes to, I feel like there's all copyright law, like, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting to think about. I do wonder if that's something also that, like, art schools might incorporate more of, and how to use tools like AI ethically and stuff like that. I feel like that would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
You know? Who could say? Now, I don't know how much you want to get into it and stuff, but you're super involved with, like, education, right? Of like younger populations, and, like, do you teach art to kids, or are you teaching, like, regular academic things, or what's that look like for you?
I used to do sort of, like, more art education when I was in grad school. So I know that I mentioned having been interested in art therapy. When I was in art school, you know, and I was going back for art education, what's kind of cool is that education and psychology as fields have an incredible overlap, you know, and so even though I wasn't studying clinical art therapy, which is an amazing discipline, by the way, and I love it. I really, really admire it. I'm still, like, incredibly supportive of the work that art therapists do in the field. But as an educator, I started thinking, like, okay, well, how can I incorporate some of the therapeutic elements of art making into an art education curriculum? And I did a lot of research into trauma-informed education, and just really thinking about how art, almost like, okay, so there's something called Universal Design for Learning, also UDL, which means that your education practice is accessible to all kinds of different learners with different learning styles, different needs and such. And so I was sort of thinking about, like, maybe an art education, an arts curriculum that is especially accessible for kids who have experienced trauma, and, like, how can not only it help kids self-regulate and be more able to participate in school. You know, like, let's say if art happens throughout the day, like, it can help them self-regulate from other stressors. But also, like, is there anything that art educators can look for in artwork to inform them of things that their students are going through?
Oh, that's so cool.
I really, you know, I found that really, really rewarding. I loved doing that. And I did my student teaching at a therapeutic school, high school, and I worked with this organization that it used to be called Medicine Wheel Productions. It's now called Spoke Art.
Yeah, don't they do the AIDS quilt show every year, right?
Yes, and so some of our teens at that year, yeah, they are fantastic. And that year, they were doing something it was about water or something, and they used these buckets like as part of this metaphorical sort of arts project, activity, community building exercise. And so we gave the kids these buckets to decorate. We talked about symbolism and different colors and what their meanings were, and it was just like a really awesome way for the kids to express themselves, and they all came out so beautifully, and I mean in their own way. They were all so individual, and yeah, that was really incredible. I loved that a lot. And then I worked in the elementary school of that therapeutic nonprofit, and while I was a teacher's assistant, so I wasn't an art teacher, but I found that drawing was a really great way for kids who were super dysregulated to sort of calm down, find themselves in it, because sometimes their like anxiety or anger would get super, super elevated.
Yeah.
And that was a really great way to sort of let them sort of be on their own and self-regulate, self-soothe, and sort of be able to like come back into the classroom in a safe way. So loved that a lot. And now I'm at this point where I'm working with teens in a museum, and some of them are super, super into art. Some of them are maybe not as like personally into art. Maybe they're into other things, but they're curious about the ways those things can interact with a creative environment like a museum. Mm-hmm. And it's incredibly rewarding. And even when I was a teenager myself, I would say I liked my teenage years a lot, but I definitely was going through a lot of stress and such, and I took classes at the Worcester Art Museum in preparation to apply to art school. So I wanted to like build my portfolio and everything. I took these classes at the Worcester Art Museum, and I built this community there. You know, I made friends there, and I sort of got to discover different sides of myself that I couldn't necessarily let surface in a school environment just because of, different social anxieties, I suppose. But it was so valuable for me to have that other place for me to grow and learn about myself. And I just love the idea that maybe this program is doing that for other teens. I think I would have loved something like that when I was a teenager.
That's a really beautiful full circle kind of moment.
Yeah, thank you. I really do love it a lot. So I'm very grateful for what I get to do, and I also just I love being in a creative environment too, and getting to connect with other individuals who have their own practices or their own interests and such. There are so many spectacularly accomplished and interesting colleagues that I'm so glad to work with.
That's awesome.
I love that so much too, especially with like teens in a museum and stuff. Because the first time I went to a real art museum, I was like a junior in high school or something, and I remember thinking that I was in a place that was so much bigger than me and that I didn't understand, and it was very profound but also really overwhelming. Do you find that like a lot of the kids you work with are like, how do you feel that they react to that environment? Because some people find, the museum really inspiring, or they find it maybe the opposite, where maybe they kind of feel like, I don't know, like
daunting, maybe.
Yeah, like scared of it in a way. Do you find that it's an exciting place for kids to be learning?
That is such a fantastic question. I feel like so much of my work is trying to make the museum feel that accessible and that exciting and that welcoming and warm, like a place of comfort rather than a place of intimidation. Mm-hmm. So I think that definitely at the beginning, I think students do get nervous. They're nervous about being lost, which I 100% understand. Like I like started off at the museum doing art education, like tour routes and stuff like that. I literally had to like draw my routes on a map to make sure I did not get lost. So they get nervous about that. They also don't necessarily know the other people. They feel a little bit like a fish out of water. And I think a big thing that helps is the relationship building element. So if you can build a trusting relationship with young people, you can sort of be a grounding presence. And that's really what I want to be in general, what everyone in our team wants to be. The more that they get to spend time there, the more that they feel at home there. Like some kids especially, you can just really see that like their time at the museum is like a core part of who they are, or they consider a core part of who they are. And they may have had trouble in other ways, but like, the people that they've met at the museum, including other students, they've really help them find themselves or certain parts of themselves they haven't discovered yet. And that's honestly one of the most gratifying things to see is like we want the museum to be a place that kids feel safe at, and that it's sort of a refuge. And I also feel like, the museum I'm at, of course, it's huge. It's really, really large, and it feels like, I think it's sort of built in a way to like make an impression of like, whoa, like sort of have that like grandiose presence. But hopefully the more you know it, the smaller it feels, I think that's kind of how I feel about it. And I think a lot of the teens feel that way about it too. And you sort of see teens who like sort of get to their natural end of the program, they're graduating high school or something like that. And they're still looking at ways to stay involved, which
that's awesome.
I think is, which I find it incredibly heartwarming. And I think that that's sort of why the team and I try to foster that kind of comforting atmosphere like within teen programs, so that the place at large, they sort of have a grounding anchor there.
Oh man, that like makes me emotional thinking about that. I just remember when I was in high school, or when I was that age, the place that for me was actually going to the MFA on Saturdays, taking the train up there. That was a big thing for me too, was going there with my friends. But more locally, I used to spend so much time at my community art center. And when I first started going there, it was so daunting to have like the idea of submitting to shows or whatever. And the art teachers that I knew in that space that really listened to me and helped me develop my work and asked me questions about what I was doing and really took it seriously were so pivotal in the direction that the rest of my life went. Like that's something that you carry with you so much, just being heard and being able to ask those questions and feel comfortable in a space like that. So it's so exciting to hear the way that you're contributing to that, and that thinking about those kids wanting to stay involved in the future is so awesome. It's such a fun age group. It sounds like it's such a fun age group to be working with.
They are so fun. I'm so glad you had those people, by the way. And,
me too.
And you're obviously incredible. So they did such wonderful. I'm so glad they helped you in that way. That's amazing. And these kids, the kids that I work with, honestly, I'm just like continually so impressed by them. They're so kind, so thoughtful, so curious, and I don't know. Their personality is amazing. They're super passionate. And even the ones who, like, I'm talking about, like, every kid, like, no matter how engaged they are, just, I love being with them and sort of learning from them, seeing how they grow, because they can re-enroll, up to, 2 or 3 times, depending on when they started. And, it's amazing. They're all incredibly stylish, by the way. That is all it's jarring. So I'm like, I was not quite that stylish.
I know.
I was a teenager.
It's that internet privilege.
So that's very, very impressive.
That's cool.
I definitely looked stupid when I was a teenager.
I did too.
Arguably I still do. So it's definitely, I have a lot to learn myself.
Oh man, that's funny. Yeah, it's really weird talking to kids in that age group, too. Not that I do it very often, but when I have, like, looking at them and thinking, like, technically, I'm, like, the last year of Gen Z, or, like, the first year of Gen Z, 97. So talking to...
Congratulations!
I barely slid in. It's, like, really wild talking to these kids and seeing how... Like, I feel like I'm on a different planet than a lot of them sometimes. They're so cool and dress so well and are into so many... And it's like we're technically the same generation, but I'm not probably accepted into that.
Right. You're an outsider.
100% accepted. I think they would be honored to invite you into their generation.
You know what's so funny? You know what's a word that I learned recently? I've heard people always say zillennials, like a younger millennial.
Yeah.
But one I heard recently that I thought was so funny was someone was saying exennial. Because they're like an older person that's technically in Gen X, but they're very close to the millennial generation.
I know. I knew so. Yeah, I've met people too that are like, man, I'm a millennial, but I'm also, they're like an older millennial. They're like, but what about Gen X? Like, why can't they just be Gen X? I know. So. And
they're like, no, I'm not. No. They're like very. Yeah. It's like the same exact thing with millennials and Gen Z.
Yeah, seriously.
I know. It's fascinating too. Like, I'm hearing more and more because I'm like in the thick of the millennials. I'm
right.
like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, I'm a millennial. I'm like right there, for better or for worse.
Right.
So it is kind of funny to hear about like what they think. I remember once one teen. I put together sort of like this like end of the semester packet for like sort of recapping their year, and they did all the writing, but I incorporated the pictures. And first of all, the kids were so unhappy with the pictures that I selected.
Oh wow!
I remember one being like, "Gabby, like what? Why this?" And I was like, "I don't know. You look cute." And she's like, you know what? You don't get it. Like after 28, everything just looks cute to you. And you're like,
oh my god. That's ruthless.
I was like, well, I don't know. I guess I'm over 28, and yeah, it does look cute. So
I guess you're right, but oh my god.
Yeah. It's funny too because in our teen programs, like we have one Gen X, a millennial, myself, and a Gen Z.
Right.
So we kind of got a nice little span there.
Yeah, got the spectrum.
But it's funny being like, oh yeah, I guess I'm old to you guys. I don't know.
That's wicked funny. I was actually talking recently. Shout out to Ruby. I was talking to Ruby recently about this, and she showed me a photo of one of the kids' like ins and outs list or something, and like on their outs was like Ozempic.
Oh my god.
Man, how do they know about this? I don't know. They know more than I do.
Right.
I've heard some scuttlebutt about Ozempic, but I'm glad that it's top of mind for the Gen Zers.
Yeah,
right.
Glad they know not to. Don't dabble in that.
Right.
I know. Shout out to Ruby for sure. Ruby is so creative too, and honestly, like some of the stuff some of the activities that she's leading them with, the zines and everything. Oh my gosh, they are so creative. It is so cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, what I love too is that like when I remember being a teenager, I like remember feeling like, oh, everybody was so creative when we were like little kids, and when you're a kid you're like a natural artist, and then it gets taken away from you, or like that's what I would think when I was a teenager. But looking back, like a lot of that age group has so much innate creativity that they don't know they have.
Yeah.
And they think that it's gone or that they're not a part of it, but you empower them just in some, kind of like small or really simple way, and it could set off so much.
Yeah. Like
so much excitement and progress and new things, and it's like I just remember feeling like I was like not capable or I wasn't artistic or something, and even the smallest amount of inspiration back then, sent me on like rabbit holes of fun and creativity.
Yeah.
I know. Oh, that's so nice. First of all, I really hope so. I think I do. I see what you're saying about like creativity sort of popping up in ways that you don't necessarily expect. Like even the teens like making something for social media or something. We did an activity last year that was run by our intern Ashton, who rules. Shout out to Ashton.
Shout out.
and they were doing these little videos, like, you know, by taking like a bunch of like quick pictures or something like in succession and creating an animation out of it. And oh my gosh, they were incredibly cool. And it was so awesome to sort of see their ideas come to fruition. Wow, that is incredibly creative. You know, they're just, you know, the different outlets that are out there for them to express themselves is incredibly cool.
That's so
and
fun.
I do think it's funny too, because we definitely in art and human development, one of my classes for grad school, we did talk about how like there are different stages of art education. I think it's Lowenfeld's stages of artistic expression or something, and how the different, how, you know, the developing brain, how you can sort of see them make sense of space and everything around them. Like, like even there's one stage, I forget which stage, I have to review my textbook, but there's a stage where, you know, there is like a ground and there's something there, and then the sky is always like on the top, like they color blue on the very, very top of the page.
Yeah.
I feel like the sky is up, you know, whereas like when you actually look at it, the sky is like everywhere. Like, yes, it's up, but it can also be behind, like what you see in front of you and stuff like that. But there is one stage sort of at like the 12-year mark where it's like, okay, and this is where the kids either decide that art is for them or they feel like they're not good and they stop completely.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's definitely, and I worked with middle schoolers a little bit too, even when I was like at the museum, you know, doing classes with kids in Boston public schools and such. I worked with middle schoolers, and yeah, there definitely is something. And I remember in my brain too, where it's like, oh, this is something I'm good at. I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Or you suddenly are just like really, really aware of like, wow, this does not look like this. Like if it doesn't look like what you're trying to make it look like, you just feel like you're not good, and you sort of stop pursuing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is something that, like, if you're, I don't know, if you're a kid and you're deciding whether or not you want to do something, like, that's always something I tried to dispel, was the idea that something had to, like, look good for you to enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
Because good is also so subjective. But I'm also glad that there are so many different ways for young people to express themselves that, okay, maybe they're, and of course, social anxiety is just, like, innate to growing up in some way or another. So, like, okay, you might feel a little nervous about doing this. You might not feel totally prepared to do this kind of artistic expression, but, you know, maybe you'll try this out and then come back to this other thing when you feel a little more comfortable with it, or, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, too. I feel like something I remember from high school is that there were things that were absolutely creative expression that people were engaging in that didn't, like, they wouldn't say that they were into the arts, but maybe they had a really curated Instagram aesthetic, or they weren't like a photographer, but they were posting on their Snapchat story every day, like highly edited photos that are very artistic, or they aren't into fashion, but they also thrift all their outfits and look awesome every day. Like, there are so many ways to kind of play with those concepts that kind of are maybe more socially acceptable for somebody that feels like they can't make art, but are still such valid and interesting forms of expression.
Yes, 100%. I also feel like some of that is like internal pressure that you put on yourself. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
if you're like dressing yourself or going out shopping, it's like, oh, well, I do this every day. It's not like a project that culminates in a big showcase or something like that. You know, it just feels so accessible. And I think that's so true. And I do kind of, you know, wonder, you know, when that, you know, if it'll circle back in a way that they're like, oh, actually, I want to pursue this or go in this direction. Oh, I really enjoyed this. Like, let me see, like, what, let me see what else I can sort of mine out of this form of creative expression.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a valuable tool of expression, because I do think, like, lack of putting pressure on yourself is so helpful.
Yeah.
For being creative and taking risks and everything. I remember I took a plain art therapy class in undergrad, and the teacher or the professor started off with saying, okay, we're going to make a drawing, and no one else is going to see it. Like, you are the only person that will see it. You're going to fold it up, do whatever you want with it, but we're just going to draw. And in like, when I was in the middle of this program where it's like, okay, you make something and then we have a critique and people will say this and that, and then you have to do this or that. And, you know, and that, I just remember that feeling like so, I don't know, so liberating in a way.
Yeah.
So I think having those opportunities to express yourself in a way that feels like low pressure and just natural is incredibly helpful.
Well, it's so interesting because I feel like, especially as you get older and you get into high school and stuff, like we maybe in education lose more opportunities where things are kind of gray. Like everything is pass or fail or good or bad, or like there's consequences for things, especially when you're thinking about like college or whatever. Like everything feels so graded and so important at that age that I think maybe sometimes what makes it so liberating is the lack of a capacity to fail or to look silly. Like that room for play isn't really there so much. Like I feel like I have more room for play than I did when I was 17 in my life now. Like if I do something and look dumb, it's not the end of the world at all. It's like literally fine.
But I know, that's honestly like such a great point, you know, when you're younger and it feels like, okay, I have to like set up everything for my future, like everything I do now will impact my life, and everything is just so intrinsically, like feels so intrinsically high pressure.
Yeah.
As it should, and that's also something that we try to tell the teens now. It's like, listen, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
You know, if this doesn't work out, like there are other things you can do, and sometimes things don't go according to plan, but it all works out so wonderfully for you in the end, or you know, or it doesn't. But then you have other ways to, you know, other things you can do, and I honestly, I do feel like that can just really impede, you know, feeling like you have room to experiment and to grow in unexpected ways. And I think providing opportunities like that for teens is so incredibly important. Also, just equipping them with, you know, that sense of security and safety in doing so.
Yeah.
Because that can be so easily lost, you know, due to such a wide variety of factors.
One thing that I find so like just kind of like ironic too is that we actually do celebrate and promote creative attributes in professional environments, but we call them just things that don't sound creative. like I don't know, like what's like some like things you would put on a resume, like
problem solving skills.
Exactly. Right. Logistics. Like, I don't know. Like these are like if you truly were some complete anomaly of a person with zero creativity, you would not be able to do so many things. Human beings are innately creative, and you use creativity, whether you're a construction worker or a nurse or a business executive, I don't know, a consultant. Like, you have to be creative.
Yeah. And
make leaps and connections and learn. And I don't know. It's kind of like,
yeah. People want innovation, and
that's enough. That literally means creating. That means to create something new when it's like not expected or something.
And also being able to like throw out ideas even if they don't stick, you know, and I think sort of like alleviating people of that sense that like everything has to be super polished before there's any kind of output or anything like that. It's like I think that I think just really de-emphasizing the need for perfection or for anything kind of polished is so important. And it's really true. One of my professors in grad school, actually, her whole thing was sort of defending art making as a discipline in schools. It's like, it's not an additive thing. It's an essential thing. It helps everything else. It helps every other subject. And if we get rid of art in education, then that's only to the student's developmental detriment.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right, and you could say like, oh, well, they're not going to use like art in their professional world. Well, it's just like most people don't use science in their professional world. Like, I don't do anything that involves biology and mitochondria or something. That doesn't mean that was a complete waste of time that I learned that stuff.
Yeah.
But it also, if obviously there are people that want to go into science and technology, that information will be way more relevant to. But
Yeah.
And the same could be said for art.
Yeah.
Or should be said for art,
Absolutely.
really.
No, and I totally agree with that too. And I think there's also something to be said for even just exercising the brain in a way that doesn't feel necessarily natural. You know, like maybe art and math, not art. I loved art class, and so I don't mean that. I mean like the classes that might have been more challenging for me,
Right.
to sort of grasp, like physics or mathematics or biology. You know, I think it was just really beneficial for me to sort of like sit down and try to understand it, because that's an incredibly valuable tool in itself, is to sort of consider things that might not occur naturally to you.
Right.
I don't know, anything that sort of exercises the brain is really, really good, even if you end up not, like, you know, I feel bad when my teens are like doing math homework and they're like, do you remember this? No.
Absolutely not.
Right.
At one point I did, not to brag, but no longer. But I do think that even if you don't remember it, I don't regret having learned it at any point, because I don't know, it's important to sort of challenge your own ways of thinking and to try to understand things in a different way. It's all so valuable.
Well, it's interesting too, because that kind of circles back to what we were saying in the beginning of our conversation about art school. Like, so much of what you do when you study art is think of new ways of seeing things, new ways of interpreting things, ways of creating symbolic meaning and communicating and messaging without, like, English, like without words. Yeah. Being able to do that is such a good mental exercise that can translate over into so many other fields.
I totally agree. Art, you know, art is just such an incredible tool of communication, and I know I said that art class was my favorite, and it doesn't mean everything always came super easily to me, and I feel like I've been challenged so much in my own way with art making, whether that was, you know, technically trying to understand how to make this person look like a person, or like use plumb lines to like put the vase right beneath the book in the correct proportion, or, you know, trying to do this class. It was called, first of all, I just want to shout out this professor as well, because he was amazing. Richard Ryan. I don't know if he's still at BU, but the drawing concepts class, I remember people telling me, like, people take this class like 2 or 3 times, like as many times as they want, just because it's so good.
Oh, wow.
In terms of practice. And I remember we sort of like used, it was a very, very different class. I remember like a lot of the initial assignments were like, okay, take a white piece of paper and a black piece of paper, tear both into 3 and make a new composition. And you make a composition you like. And then like, okay, now tear it up and double the size and stuff like that. Like constantly sort of telling you to create and then destroy, then create and then destroy, to go quickly. And I remember that was super challenging for me to kind of let go and embrace that kind of process as well. But the whole thing was about like not holding your own art dear, and to because like doing that will inhibit your ability to stretch yourself and to try new things. So that class was super, super pivotal in terms of like my own art making. And while my own artistic process since art school has sort of gone up and down since then, versus like, you know, how experimental do I want to be? How much do I want to like sit and like think about my next steps? I wouldn't have been able to do any of that, or even adjust my own speed or approach, like if it hadn't been for that class. So.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
The concept of destroying an artwork that you've made is so difficult to grasp too.
Oh my gosh. It's so difficult. Luckily, it wasn't anything that was, I guess, too, you know, like the stuff that he was having us destroy, like we hadn't like been working on it for like months or anything like that, but it was one of those things where it's like, oh, I actually kind of like it. I actually thought about it and I made something I like I don't really want to destroy it.
Yeah, please don't make me do that.
But at the same time, you know, in like, you know, my latter years, like junior year and senior year, I remember I sort of had to have that experience to have the guts to like paint over an entire section of my artwork that was not working at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, no matter how long I had like spent on it. And it's really interesting now, sort of doing pen and ink work. in like, I don't know, I want to say like a few years ago, not a few years ago, I want to say like 2014 to 2016-ish, I remember I did not do any planning at all. I literally just would like open my pens. I have like different size pens and such, and I would just go. Like I would just start, and it's like, okay, well, however it looks like that. I think things have changed a little bit since then, where like, oh no, actually I do want this to look like quite geometrical, and and to like make it kind of exact, because I want that juxtaposition of like the geometric and the organic.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the beginning, it was just really all freehand, improvisational. And I try to keep some of that, but I think I have like a little bit more of a blend of like planned and improvisational now.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I have sort of that awareness too of like, oh, what approach do I want to embrace over here in this part, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, so much of it is about the awareness. Like when you were talking about the time that one of your professors who taught you about color theory and painting came to your show and saw black and white drawn pieces. It's like you wouldn't be able to get to a point where of like creative maturity in your work without hearing those lessons and taking what you wanted from them. It doesn't mean that they were null. It just means that it wasn't where you landed right now, but they're still there and you're considering them, you know?
Absolutely. And, you know, and maybe like, even though like my artwork now really diverges from the kind of artwork my professors make, it's like we both still have that initial seed of just seeing something out in the world in a composition that we want to pursue and create, you know? So even if our artwork looks totally different in the end, you know, that initial like inspiration, that source of inspiration that he talked so beautifully about in class, like I now share that with him.
That's so cool.
Yeah. It's really cool. And I remember, I don't know, I had such amazing professors. I remember them telling me things like about seeking inspiration from other artists and like taking things, or not like taking things, but like, you know, finding things that you appreciate in other people's artwork and just sort of seeing how you can synthesize that and do it in your own way, you know, something that really inspires you. Sort of like open your eyes to different kinds of communication and like how that can inform your own practice.
Well, that's such a neat thing too. Like once you have, like when you've sort of collected this repertoire mentally of different perspectives and different applications, you can go into a gallery and look at a piece of art and not know what the artist's intentions or thoughts behind it were, but see a way that it connects to things that you've made or you think about and find that overlap. Like that's so fascinating to me. I love that from a curatorial brain.
I completely love that too. And actually that's one of the coolest things about even showing my art sometimes is, you know, like, because so much of the imagery that's in my artwork are sort of pulled from my own experience and stuff like that. Like my mom being from Montreal, we took all these drives up to Montreal growing up, back and forth,
and that's cool.
Like, through northern New England and everything. So like the mountains are always in my art piece, stuff like that, like, or like electrical lines, like, you know, my high school is next to like a ton of electrical lines and I thought those were so beautiful because they're like so mighty, and there are a lot of electrical towers also in southern Quebec as we're like driving up, and so I'll like put those in there, something like that, and you know, someone might look at something I drew and it reminds them of their own memories.
That's awesome.
In a way that I just find, I don't know, I think that's like such a special way to connect with someone, and I always feel really moved when that's, I don't know, that my art can evoke that memory for someone or that experience, or it's incredibly cool, and I always appreciate when other artists have done that for me too.
Yeah, that is so special. It's really cool too when you enter like a juried show or a themed show and you can see like 20 other people working around a similar concept, but all of the work looks so different. I love seeing my art contextualized that way and see how other people have contextualized their pieces or related to the theme.
Incredibly true. That is such an awesome point. I know. I feel like that must be such a cool exercise to be a juror on that too.
Oh, I know.
I've never done that.
Like, you said you've done that, Brian?
Oh no, I said I've never done that. I did gallery coordinating a few years ago where I had to, you know, coordinate with judges that the gallery brought in and I was always very jealous of the other, like I wish that I could judge it instead of them. So.
Well, Brian, you know, you absolutely can. Like,
maybe someone will invite me to do. I don't know. That'd be fun.
Didn't you do one at FBAC?
I've been involved in a bunch shows that they've done, and Theo's curated with them, but I haven't judged any. I haven't done any like juried show stuff there. But
yeah,
I would like to. So if anyone listening wants to invite me to judge a show, honestly, I would really love to do that. Actually,
I have opinions.
I would 100% go. That would be the coolest thing ever. I know. I feel like there are a lot of like online galleries too. I don't know. I love that idea. Of course, we also talked to like curators at the museum too, about like their thought process and putting together shows and everything like that. I don't know. It's so neat.
Yeah.
It's so neat to see like the different way art pieces connect, and I don't know. People's creative eye varies so much, but they still like the finished pieces sort of speak to each other in a kind of beautiful way.
Which is so neat. Like when we're talking about how these concepts are building blocks of a visual language, like that is, I guess, the metaphorical sentence. Like when it's all in the same room and it makes sense, and you can't put your finger on why they're all the same, but they are, and they speak to each other in that way. Like that is becoming fluent as a viewer in that fourth dimension visual language.
Absolutely.
So cool.
No. That's awesome. I think about that even with my own apartment. Where I'm like, I feel like I've collected so many like art pieces that I enjoy. I'm like, how can I somehow? They vary so much. I'm like, but I love all of them. So they have to, like, fit together somehow. So, yeah, it's an ongoing.
Cool.
That's an ongoing creative process on my end.
Yeah, I feel that. It is really funny when you look at the things that you're drawn to, and they somehow have something in common, but.
Yeah, I know. Or there are different like parts of the pieces that like really speak to me. Like I think I got a Charles Sheeler photograph from the museum, and it's like incredibly industrial, and I like, love it. I think it's like so cool. I really like love industrial imagery.
Yeah.
But then I have like other pieces that it's like, oh, this is like very like fantasy. I don't know. And I think sometimes like in my own artwork, I'm like, how do I combine all these different visual languages to something that feels cohesive?
That makes sense though with your work, because like you were talking about the power lines and the kind of trippy organic shapes that you have in your pieces. Like I do see that kind of balance between line and organic.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow, that means a lot. And I made something once, and it was like, this is like really Art Nouveau inspired, but then I like put like a factory in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I'm like, does this work? I don't know. But it's all about the experimentation, as we've touched upon.
Yeah.
So, so yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to like experiment with these different kinds, like as you said, visual languages.
Yeah.
And how they interact and how they can sort of fit together in different ways and create a whole new visual experience.
That's awesome.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh,
are you guys working on any fun things on your end?
I don't know. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm finishing up my bachelor's right now. So I just went back to school to do that. So I've been spending all my time writing, doing discussion board posts. It's been an adjustment for sure, but it's fun.
Do you enjoy writing?
I do. I'm actually, now that I'm back in the swing of doing essays and stuff again, I lament this free time that I had before, that I could have been doing it for fun. Like, I wish that I had double the free time so that I could continue writing about things that I actually care more about. But yeah, I do. I like ruminating on very meta concepts. So it's a good place. Art history is a good place for me to be right now.
Oh yeah, that's incredible.
It's fun.
That must be super, super cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's good to get it done, but it's been I feel like I've dropped off the map as far as visual output has gone, because it's all I'm on Blackboard every day. That's where I can be found.
Yeah. Sure. What about you, Brian?
I'm working on I've been making little like art songs, which sounds kind of funny, but
yes, no, I think that's so cool.
Oh,
I love
thank
that.
Yeah, they've been kind of, because I've been doing music for forever, but I've and art forever, but I've never really found I guess a cohesive way that they would kind of be in the same, creative process. But recently I've been doing that, and it's been a ride. It's been definitely a weird experience. Really fun.
I'm so glad.
And people like them. I don't know. It's like the idea is that just because people sometimes will enjoy a goofy song, and people might enjoy some kind of instructional information about art or whatever. So I'm like, what about both?
Yeah, and honestly, they're super catchy. Are you kidding?
Oh, thanks.
They're very enjoyable to listen to.
Oh, thank you. That's so funny.
You're onto something quite good.
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll see where it goes.
That's awesome. Well, I look forward to just sort of seeing what you guys do. It's like, I don't know, I love everything you guys do, like, not only with these conversations, but with your own creative output. I think it's so cool, and just, yeah, I'm a big admirer.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, you too. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, it was wonderful talking with you and learning about, what's learning about your life and what you do,
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to have someone interesting and fun and cool on the show.
Oh, thank you guys. Honestly, huge honor to be here. I really, really, like I said, love what you do, and this was an awesome conversation. So
awesome.
Much appreciated on my end.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, anytime. I love talking about art, and I love the perspectives that you have on it. So, you know where to find us.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Awesome.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll send you that. We'll let you know. This might even actually go out like
probably this week.
This week or next week, if that. So.
Oh, hot dog.
So.
That's exciting.
So we'll send it. We'll send it on over to you.
Awesome.
Anywho,
amazing.
yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you.
be in touch.
We'll talk
Thanks.
to you soon.
Absolutely. Have a great night, guys.
You too. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Boston Art Podcast is an independent DIY production by Brian Huntress and Theodora Earthworms. The information contained in this episode represents the views and opinions of the original creators or our guests, and does not represent any institution, organization, or business. Find us on Instagram at Boston Art Podcast, and tune in for a new episode every Friday. Thank you for listening.